My family and I recently returned from visiting my parents who live in southern Florida. We enjoyed a little bit of family time. It gave me an opportunity to get out and do just a little bit of backpacking out on the Ocean to Lake Trail. It was a perfect opportunity to get away from what is definitely still winter here in northern Utah. Given the really warm conditions, it sort of provided an opportunity to take advantage of that and bring what is probably my lowest starting base weight of any backpacking trip I've ever gone on. There's a lot of things here that I just didn't have to bring with me. Whereas when I go up into high elevations here in the Mountain West, I mean, you just got to bring a lot more insulating layers, but we'll get into that into a little bit more detail once we open up the pack here. If you're curious to know what my base weight was, I don't know off the top of my head. I'll have to add it up in my lighter pack, but when I do, I will put the number right here. As you can see, it's really lightweight. The backpack I brought with me on this trip is of course, the Pilgrim Ultralight. This is technically the Jacassi in terms of the suspension of the backpack. You'll notice that mine has a couple little different features. Given that I'm sort of always doing research and development for our backpacks, I'm always sort of trying out new things. But anyway, it's a 32-liter backpack, and of course it does have a nice padded hip belt, and it does have 2 carbon fiber stays. This is probably one of the lightest backpacks on the market that still has a frame. And that means for a trip like this, it really worked out well. It wasn't overkill, but even with some food and water added in here, it was really, really comfortable to carry. I still vastly prefer a framed pack over frameless packs, even if I have an incredibly low base weight like I did on this hike. All right, we'll start by talking about what's on the outside of the pack. Really simply, 1 liter smart water bottle. On the other side here, I've got my carbon fiber trekking pole, which I did hike with a little bit on this hike. But I also mainly brought this for setting up my trekking pole tent, which I'll get into later. And then also, as far as water storage goes, I have a new piece of equipment here that I haven't brought with me on any other hike before, and that is the Platypus Quick Draw. You might remember in previous videos I've made that I prefer to use the Katadyn Be-Free for most of the hikes I go on, just because it's probably the fastest and most convenient water filter to use. However, it's maybe not the best water filter to use when you're dealing with, let's say, pretty grimy water. On this hike, I definitely pulled out some pretty gross water out of the swamps and canals that Florida is sort of famous for. And the Platypus Quick Draw was really, really excellent for this. It never once slowed down, and it's really easy to use. I like the slightly wider opening for the bag. Comparatively to like a smart water bottle, it's easier to fill, kind of like the Katadyn Be-Free is. And this thing is really easy to back flush with a smart water bottle. So honestly, this thing worked great. I'll probably still stick with my Be-Free filter for when I'm like up at high altitudes and filtering like snow melt off, like really clean water. But any time I'm gonna do a backpacking trip where the water is, let's say, slightly more likely to be in worse condition, I'm definitely going to stick with the Platypus Quick Draw. It seems like it's a really hardy filter, and it was perfect for this trip. All right, on the outside, on the big stretchy pocket here, I've got my Garmin inReach Messenger, which is my go-to choice for like satellite SOS. Plenty of cell coverage on this trip, so this was kind of overkill, but it's still always good to have. Got my foam pad for sitting on. First aid kit. My little bag with my like trowel and toilet paper, tent stakes. I'm used to bringing 6 stakes along with me, but now I have to carry 8 because I have a different shelter, which we'll talk about in a minute. But I got 8. These are the Easton aluminum nano spikes. They're the 6-inch variety. One other thing, I did have my Peak Design capture clip for carrying my camera. I have a new camera, and I know most people in the ultralight backpacking world don't really care to talk about cameras. So I might make a video on it specifically later, but I'm now carrying the Panasonic S9, and it's probably the first camera I've ever had that I'm actually like genuinely satisfied for bringing on backpacking trips. It strikes up just the right balance between really, really excellent image and video quality and also size and weight. It's perfect for backpacking, but I might make a video on it a little bit more later. And because I'm so pleased with it, I hope to maybe this summer maybe actually make some trail videos. So if you guys are curious to see what it's like to actually go on some of these hikes that I do, I'm hoping to bring that to you guys later. All right, we will open up the main compartment of the backpack here. All right, first up, we've got the Plexola Light, which is my new shelter for this year. You might remember in the past I really enjoyed using the tarp tent Eon Li, also a really excellent tent, but this year I wanted something that was a little bit easier to pack down and fit a little bit more appropriately in an ultralight bag like this. This tent doesn't have those carbon fiber rods like the tarp tent does in order to set it up, but of course that makes the pack size a little bit longer. And that's really what I was going for this year. I wanted a really nice lightweight shelter, sets up with one trekking pole and a couple of stakes, and doesn't require any additional rods in order to set it up. I just wanted the most simplistic shelter possible, and this is pretty much about the best you can find as far as weight and simplicity goes, while still having a full bug net and bathtub floor. I happened to get the light version just because that's what was available on the used gear subreddit that I happened to buy this on. I didn't buy it brand new. You might remember I mentioned that I tried out the Ultraplex from Z-Packs one time and didn't find the build quality to be that impressive. This one's totally different though, so I don't know if they just had a bad day when they were seam taping that Ultraplex that I had. The build quality is a lot more impressive on this Plex Solo that I have, and pitching this and using this was awesome. This one sets up with a slightly taller trekking pole than the Eon Li does, and I honestly felt like this had just as much head and foot room as the Eon Li did, but it doesn't need the carbon fiber struts in the corners. So Z-Packs really knew what they were doing when they were figuring out the geometry of this in order to maximize like headroom and stuff like that for a really, really low weight. The one downside here I see is that the Plex Solo Light definitely has, I would say, a larger footprint than the Eon Li does. So if you're trying to really cram a tent into small spaces, this might not be quite the best choice for that as far as single trekking pole tents go. But I think for most conditions, this thing will work perfectly. As an added bonus, it really is just about the lightest tent you could possibly buy. I can't think of anything lighter than this, and I'm really excited to use it for the remainder of this year. Moving on, I've got my rain gear. This is the same stuff I've had in the past, just some cheap rain pants from Amazon. And then also I've got my rain jacket from Leave Outdoors. In here I've got my titanium spork. I got a little bag that I made for it so that it won't poke holes in my food bag anymore. And then I also have my stove here. This is the Soto Amicus, really, really good stove. I've got my ditty bag here, which I'm not going to go into in detail because I've done that in previous videos before. However, the one thing here that was really important was the bug head net this time. I definitely needed it at night. I'm used to out here in the Mountain West to not need this all the time, but at least down there in southern Florida in the swamps, the bug head net was a requirement. Next, I've got just a bag of food here to sort of simulate what I might take on a 2 to 3 day trip. And now we're sort of getting into the couple of items that make this kit very much different than what I'm used to bringing out here in the Mountain West up in high elevation, and that is my insulating layers. Like I said earlier, I just didn't need to bring a whole lot comparatively to a lot of trips that I go on. This right here is the only additional insulating layer I brought as far as clothing goes, and that's the Mountain Hardwear Air Mesh hoodie. I brought this with me specifically because it has a hood. I didn't want to bring a beanie on this trip. I didn't feel like it was strictly necessary, but I at least wanted to have something to cover my head in case it was a little chilly. But yeah, this thing is great. I've talked about it before in other videos, and crazy enough, on this hike, I seriously did not wear this one time. I was glad that I brought this. It's always good to have maybe a little bit of additional like insulating clothing insurance, if you will, on a hike. And this was perfect because it's so lightweight that given that I didn't end up wearing it, I didn't feel bad about it. I'm happy to just toss this in a backpack. It ended up only getting down to about 60 degrees at night while I was camping out there. And yeah, really just did not need a lot in the way of insulating layers. All right, I've got, right here is my pillow, which is the, what is this? This is the Nemo Philo Elite Luxury. It's what I'm trying out for this year, and I guess I've used it a little bit before in the past, but this is a good pillow. I like it. And then I've got my 650 milliliter titanium pot. Next up is the Big Agnes Zoom UL, which of course is a really, really comfortable pad. It's maybe not the most well insulated pad in the world, but I found for most 3-season use cases, it works well. On a trip like this, where it was 60 degrees at night, you could have gotten away with any sleeping pad you could ever want as far as warmth goes. So I was happy to save the weight and take this because it is the lightest pad that I currently own, and yet it's still really durable and really comfortable. All right, and then the last thing I've got here in the bag is my sleeping insulation, which is a weird one. I typically when I'm hiking out here in Utah, will bring a 20-degree quilt with me, but that would have been totally overkill when it's only 60 degrees outside. So what I brought with me is actually this kind of odd piece of gear, which is, this is a down blanket from Get Out Gear. I think that's the name of it. Anyway, my wife and I used to keep up with like a car camping YouTube channel, and this was something that was sent to us for free. I don't even think I reviewed it. They just sent it to us with basically no strings attached. And this is probably not something I would ever like buy on my own. I mean, it's a nice product, but it's like, I want to say it's 70 bucks for this thing, and it's only 650 fill down. The materials aren't incredibly high quality, but you know what? For this trip, it was perfect because I didn't want to overheat in my 20-degree quilt, and this is basically the thinnest quilt I have. As an added bonus, this thing is only 16 ounces as is. I think they say it'll keep you warm down to 45 or 50 degrees. 50 degrees, it would probably be fine there, but I definitely wouldn't trust it any lower than that, mainly because it has sewn through baffles. The actual loft of it is okay, but the sewn through baffles definitely let out a lot of heat. This is the type of thing I will very, very rarely find myself taking as the only piece of insulation for backpacking trips. But for this trip, given the really warm temperatures, it worked out really well, and really lightweight, and it packs down really, really small. So if you are looking for something for warm weather that packs down really tight, this might be something to look into. Okay, and my backpack is now empty. As you can see, I did not bring a lot with me. That's one of the nice things about backpacking in Florida is not a ton of gear is often required. That being said, always check the weather conditions when you're about to go out. I did see earlier in the year that the panhandle of Florida did get actually some snow. So make sure to check the weather conditions. You can't always just assume that things are going to be perfect. I did check the weather very, very consistently before I went out on this trip to make sure that this gear would be adequate. And come to find out, it definitely was. It was actually, in some cases, more than adequate. Make sure you go check out pilgrimul.com. Like I've said before, we're making some of the lightest framed backpacks on the market, and they're partially customizable. We've got a lot of good fabric choices, and keep an eye out because I might swap out some new shoulder straps and hip belts on this specific pack and put it on our ready-made pack page. So if you're interested in specifically this pack, go check out that page because it might be available depending on when I can get it listed. And as always, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.